The psychology of a predator. Every monster has an origin story, a slow-burning fuse lit long before the first drop of blood is spilled. In the historic city of Settat, Morocco, that fuse was a man named Hicham. Born in 1976, Hicham's life was fractured from the start. Abandoned by his father at the tender age of 3, he was raised by a single mother and a grandfather. His grandfather was a man who scraped by. He worked as a poorly paid elementary school security guard. Growing up in the crushing grip of poverty, Hicham quickly learned a harsh truth. The world gave nothing away for free. He dropped out of school early. He jumped from one grueling blue-collar trade to another. First, he worked as a bicycle repair apprentice. Then he transitioned into blacksmithing and welding. Eventually, he found a steady rhythm as a street vendor. He began selling second-hand clothes in the neighborhood of Hey Maimouna. For a brief period, ambition drove him south to the agricultural hubs of Agadir. But the grueling manual labor in Agadir yielded pennies. It was nothing compared to the sweat equity he put in. Disillusioned, he returned to Settat, back to the clothing stalls, and back to his true obsession: boxing. Hicham possessed a lethal combination: a towering athletic physique, remarkable agility, and a deceptive intellect. But a dark dual identity was beginning to take root. Through the second-hand clothing trade, Hicham crossed paths with affluent wholesalers. These were men who introduced him to a hedonistic underworld, a world of casinos, substance abuse, and midnight debauchery. His hard-earned money quickly evaporated into addiction. As his finances dwindled, his grip on reality loosened. A toxic resentment toward society festered within him. He felt entitled to a life he couldn't afford. And soon, that entitlement turned deadly. It began with an obsession. Her name was Salma, a beautiful, educated young nurse. Salma's daily commute took her right past Hicham's clothing stall. Day after day, Hicham watched her from the shadows. He mapped her routine and calculated her timetables. He harbored a deeply misplaced infatuation. Hicham knew his grim reality. A broke street vendor with a drug problem would never win her heart. He knew a respectable medical professional would never look at him. So, he fabricated a phantom identity. One afternoon, he intercepted Salma. He flashed a card with distinct red and blue stripes. It was nothing more than his sports club membership badge, but he exploited her lack of familiarity with official insignias. Undercover law enforcement? He lied smoothly. He introduced himself as a high-ranking officer. I apologized for the unorthodox approach, but I needed to ensure you felt safe. I've seen you on your commute, and my intentions are entirely honorable. Hooked by the prestige of a dashing detective, Salma fell into the trap. Weeks of calculated courtship followed. Meetings were always kept in strictly public spaces by a cautious Salma, but a predator only needs one lapse in vigilance. During a seemingly innocent walk, Hicham steered her toward an isolated, heavily wooded area. In a heartbeat, the charming suitor vanished. Utilizing his boxing prowess, Hicham brutally assaulted her. He overpowered and violated Salma. He robbed her of her belongings before leaving her traumatized in the dirt. Salma bravely fled to the authorities. She reported that an undercover officer had attacked her. But the investigation hit a brick wall. Hicham had used a fictitious name and a counterfeit persona. Believing he had committed the perfect crime, Hicham's confidence morphed into something far more dangerous. It became pure, unadulterated megalomania. His twisted psyche underwent a terrifying evolution. He realized his fatal flaw in Salma's case. His flaw was that he had left a witness alive. If he was going to satisfy his urges again, he could leave no survivors. Enter Fatima Zahra. Born in 1984, she was an intelligent graduate of the Institute of Applied Technology. She worked at a local cable manufacturing plant. Crucially, she was also Hicham's neighbor. Unlike Salma, Fatima Zahra recognized Hicham. She knew him as a familiar face from the neighborhood. To everyone, he was a seemingly hardworking, athletic local guy. Luring her into a false sense of security, Hicham convinced her to walk with him. He took her near the secluded city railway tracks at dusk. In the shadow of the train tracks he struck, knowing she could easily identify him to the police. Hicham bypassed mere assault. He wrapped his powerful hands around her throat. He utilized his immense athletic strength to crush her airway. Fatima Zahra was dead within minutes. Hicham violated her lifeless body. He stole her mobile phone and hid her corpse beneath the brush. Days later, Hicham was abruptly arrested at his clothing stall. Panic gripped him. Had they found Fatima Zahra? To his immense relief, the police hadn't connected him to the murder. Instead, local detectives had tracked him down through a breakthrough in Salma's case. Faced with the charges, Hicham confessed to the assault with unsettling eagerness. To the authorities, he seemed remorseful. In reality, it was a brilliant tactical maneuver. He gladly accepted a 1-year prison sentence for assault. He did this strictly to insulate himself from a potential execution for capital murder. While Hicham sat safely in a cell, Fatima Zahra's body was discovered. Forensic pathologists confirmed death by manual strangulation. Her death was followed by post-mortem violation. Investigators tracked her stolen Motorola phone to a local sanitation worker. The worker had simply found it discarded in a dumpster. The trail went cold. Hicham's gamble had paid off. He served his 12 months and walked out of prison in early 2008. He was now a free man with a blueprint for murder. Prison did not rehabilitate Hicham. It refined him. He now had a rigid, lethal methodology. Target, trap, strangle, violate, vanish. In the spring of 2008, he locked eyes on Noja, a young woman renowned in the neighborhood for her striking beauty. Using the same predatory charm, he isolated Noja. He choked the life out of her, violated her body, and vanished into the night. When Noja's body was recovered, forensic investigators noticed a chillingly familiar pattern. The bruising on the neck and the post-mortem signature were identical. There was an absolute lack of defensive wounds under the victim's fingernails. This pointed to a perpetrator of immense physical strength. DNA was harvested from the scene. It perfectly matched the profile found on Fatima Zahra. Settat officially had a serial killer on the loose. Before the task force could even mobilize, a third body was discovered. A young woman named Nawal. She was found partially nude from the waist down, discarded in an isolated area. Her hyoid bone was shattered by the same terrifyingly precise strangulation technique. 3 young women were dead. The city of Settat was completely paralyzed by fear. The breakthrough came down to meticulous criminal profiling. Lead investigators noted a vital detail. All the homicides were strictly contained within the geographic boundaries of Settat. Furthermore, the sudden spree had commenced abruptly in March 2008. The lead detective had a theory. The killer isn't a traveler. He is a local resident who was recently unleashed back into the community. Perhaps someone who was recently released from prison. The order was given. Cross-reference every single inmate released from correctional facilities since January 2008. Filter the list exclusively for individuals with a history of violent sex crimes or assault against women. Out of thousands of records, the computer spat out a short list of 50 names. Among them was Hicham, the second-hand clothes vendor who had just served time for the assault of a nurse. The task force rounded up all 50 suspects for mandatory DNA swabbing. When Hicham's profile was run through the database, the results came back. It was an undeniable, flawless match to the biological evidence left on the bodies of the victims. The hunt was over. Inside the interrogation room, faced with irrefutable forensic evidence, Hicham didn't flinch. Instead, the dam broke. He spilled his secrets with a chilling, arrogant composure. He admitted to hunting his victims based solely on their aesthetics. He detailed how he targeted Salma and murdered his neighbor Fatima Zahra. He explained how he stalked Noja and ambushed Nawal after spotting her at her workplace. When asked why he killed them, his answer exposed the depth of his narcissistic depravity. "I couldn't control myself around beauty," Hicham stated calmly. "But I knew my reality. Because I was poor, these women would never choose me willingly. They would look down on me. He continued, "So, I decided to take my share of the world's beauty by force, and I killed them so they could never take it back." The prosecution immediately ordered a comprehensive psychiatric evaluation to determine his fitness for trial. The state's top psychiatrists returned a definitive verdict. Hicham was entirely sane. He possessed no cognitive defects or breaks from reality. He was simply driven by an overwhelming internal malice, deep-seated societal rage, and an absolute lack of empathy. He was fully accountable for his atrocities. The judiciary wasted no time. Hicham was convicted on multiple counts of capital murder, aggravated assault, and felony robbery. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Today, Hicham remains locked away in the shadows of a maximum security prison. He stands as a terrifying reminder that sometimes the most vicious monsters are the ones hiding in plain sight, walking among us, watching from the local market stalls.